So you thought that trying to have kids was awkward in The Handmaid's Tale? Oh boy. So, Hulu just dropped the full, all 10 episodes of the new series. It's a miniseries, The Great, and it stars Elle Fanning and Nicholas Hoult, and it's about Catherine the Great, and it's from the writer of The Favourite. So I was pretty stoked for this, and I have thoughts, but before I get into those, and I won't be doing spoilers in this particular review. If there's enough popular demand, maybe I'll do another review with spoilers at a later time. But before I give my thoughts, if you're new to the channel and if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on other shows and other movies, other projects, please consider subscribing so that you can see more content like this. And of course, you can watch other videos as soon as this video ends. So, getting into The Great, which I mentioned The Favourite, and they're clearly marketing this to people who liked The Favourite. And I feel like if you liked The Favourite, this is a bit of a disappointment because it's not as sophisticated as that was. But I'm going to try to not judge this based on comparing it to The Favourite, because most things aren't nearly as sophisticated as The Favourite was. So I'm going to try to judge this on its own merits. And on its own merits, it's pretty good. I quite liked it. And I've always had reservations about Elle Fanning as an actress, and she doesn't exactly put those aside here. But, you know, people talk about how acting is primarily, in a certain sense, just casting. Like, you can cast someone perfectly in the right role and it'll come off as good acting, and hence we got Gary Cooper and Rock Hudson back in the day. And I feel like Elle Fanning is perfectly cast here in this role as this person who kind of vacillates between being this hopelessly idealistic romantic and being this cunning, socially conscious schemer. And I feel like sometimes the shifts in character weren't completely motivated from my perspective, but it was pretty interesting to watch, and I felt like she definitely didn't hurt this show. I feel like maybe I would have liked to see them go with a lesser known actress. I know that they're kind of limited when they're trying to cast someone of the appropriate age, but I think someone else who is less well known maybe could have done a better job. But Elle Fanning didn't disgrace herself. Nicholas Hoult is great here, electric every time he's on scene, exactly what I hoped he would be as the kind of dim-witted man-child who play, you know, he's the monarch who's in charge of all of Russia, and he doesn't really understand how people feel about him. He doesn't understand how his power keeps people from being honest with him. And I feel like they kind of ran out of places to go with this character pretty early on, because within the first episode he'd already done so many terrible things and shown no capacity for growth. So as the series went on, he's just kind of a one-note character, but it's a pretty funny note. And I enjoyed, like I said, I enjoyed every moment he was on screen. And Nicholas Hoult was, he hasn't always been able to pick the best roles, but I feel like this is a role that really plays to his strengths as an actor. There's a lot of great supporting actors here. To me, Adam Godfrey as the Archbishop was a standout. I felt like he operated... It was interesting because he's kind of a villainous character, but he managed to not make him a foaming at the mouth stereotype, depicting how the negative influence of religion at some times in history. And look, I'm a religious person myself, but I think we have to be honest that at certain times in history, especially at this time, religion wasn't exactly moving the world towards progress. And this portrays that well, but it's done pretty winsomely in my opinion. It's done with a lot of wit and style. Now, if you didn't watch The Favourite, you might not be prepared for what this is going to do. It calls itself a occasionally true story, which I think is a pretty fair way of describing it. It's very anachronistic, very stylized. Like, they do have very, from what I know, period accurate costumes. Everybody talks with British accents, which is apparently what people in Russia had Wink. I'm not serious, in case that wasn't clear. But, you know, it works. I mean, I've become used to this conceit where people, no matter what the country is, whether it be France or Germany or wherever, they speak with British accents when people do period dramas. And of course, Elle Fanning is not British, so she's just putting this on for the show. But overall, it's just a sprightly, witty story, and it's very satirical, and you have to kind of accept that it's very offensive. It's very dark humor. You know, you have to be able to laugh at death. And sometimes I feel like it had a little bit of a challenge with tone, because I think that it tried to portray Elle Fanning's Catherine the Great as somewhat of a heroine, and she's up against the patriarchy and all the powers that be in the day. And I feel like in some ways this isn't a good tone, this isn't a good slant for a satire to go with, because I feel like you kind of have to take your heroes a little bit less seriously in a satire, which, you know, they do undercut her at numerous points. They do point out inconsistencies with her thinking, and they point out, you know, that she's not a perfect person, and they give her realistic struggles. But I felt like overall it was way too sunny in the way it portrayed her, and for a satire I felt like that created problems for the tone of this as a whole. And I felt like that there were some sequences that were way too earnest and kind of clashed with the rest of it, and I felt like they should have tried to maintain that satirical tone throughout. But again, I felt like this was very strong, very funny. I had a lot of scenes where I just outright laughed. Very interesting throughout, not as artistic or as sophisticated as The Favorite, as I said, but this is on television or streaming, and you kind of have to make allowances for that. And I just thought overall the pacing was very good. It didn't lag at any point. It had a lot of interesting grapplings with what power structures did in that day. And I feel like it's kind of like Hamilton in that it kind of, by not being historically accurate and by, you know, having actors that are diverse playing roles that, you know, were not actually diverse in history, just kind of helps us to see this history through a modern lens. And I'll admit, I'm not particularly up on a lot of the history, so if I say anything that is kind of off base in terms of the history, sorry, I haven't really studied up on this. I did watch the miniseries on HBO starring Helen Mirren as Catherine the Great, and this is kind of an interesting companion piece to that, although the tones could not be more different between these two series. So I highly recommend checking this out. I think it's a breezy, crisp show, and I think that if you like period dramas and if you like dark comedies, kind of like the film that came out, The Death of Stalin, recently, I think that you'll enjoy this. Those are my thoughts on The Great on Hulu, but let me know what you think in the comments, and as always, you can watch more videos right now.